Outreach's Magic Pride Festival is back this year for its 7th anniversary. The festival will be held on Sunday, August 17th from 1 to 6 p.m. at Warner Park. The fest will include performances from local artists who identify as LGBTQ+, food and beverage carts, merchant vendors, info booths, family-friendly games, and more. The Magic Pride Festival celebrates the voices of queer and trans BIPOC in the Madison community. Suggested donation to attend is $5 to $10 or a non-perishable food item for Outreach's pantry. Learn more details at outreachmagicfestival.org. Looking to add a little glow to your home? Wisco Home Goods has you covered with hand-poured soy candles crafted in small batches, made to burn clean, and scented to perfection. Stop by their store at 4664 Cottage Grove Road on Madison's beautiful east side, or browse online at wiscohomegoods.com. Shop local, breathe easy, feel good with Wisco Home Goods. This is CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Hey, before we get to today's conversation, I have a favor to ask. CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. If you took it last year, we would be grateful if you filled it out again because we can't use last year's data anymore. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the survey. It's only 7 minutes long. We timed it. That's citycast.fm/survey. When you take the survey, you'll also be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card and CityCast Madison swag. citycast.fm/survey. Get after it. When Wisconsin lawmakers passed the biennial budget earlier this summer, the UW system received an overall funding boost. More money was requested and more money was offered. That is, with strings attached, including new stipulations for teachers. Professors at most state universities will be required to teach 4 classes each semester. Joining me to talk about this new rule is John Shelton, president of higher education for the American Federation of Teachers, or AFT Wisconsin, the union that represents professionals working in the UW system. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. And our union and support represents folks in the UW system, K-12, tech colleges, and a number of other state employees. But obviously happy to be here to talk about higher education today.
Yeah, thanks for that added context. And also with us is Barrett Elward, co-president at United Faculty and Academic Staff, UFAS, the faculty and staff union at UW-Madison. Barrett, welcome to CityCast Madison.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, John, in addition to your union role, you are also a professor at UW Green Bay. Want to ask you, what might this change mean for the average professor? Can you put these new teaching requirements into perspective? Like, how disruptive might this change be?
Well, here's where I would like to start, actually. What's really important about this budget is that you had lawmakers and the governor essentially agree to a deal to micromanage all of our working conditions without so much as a conversation with any of us. So, the question of how disruptive it's going to be, a lot of that's going to depend on how this is implemented and how our unions actually, kind of fight back to make it less disruptive. But the point is, Bianca, could you imagine the legislature passing a law that micromanages like the working conditions of like the state highway patrol? They would never do that, right? This was a bad faith effort to score political points by Republicans in the legislature that I think the governor agreed to for reasons that are, kind of disappointing. And so the reality is, for the longest time, folks in the UW system, and this is administration and faculty and staff, have been able to negotiate within the parameters of those universities' budgets what workload would look like. And, it hasn't always been a fair negotiation, right? I mean, that one of the things we're doing is pushing for union recognition right now. But what this does is it basically ties the hands of everybody and says, you have to have everybody teach a certain amount of courses. And, what that does is it hamstrings our ability to restructure things so that we can meet student needs, whether that is, having people have course reassignments to do advising for students or to do other kinds of teaching and learning professional developments. And it also ties the hands of folks to negotiate research reassignments. Again, at UW Green Bay, the teaching load mandate is 4.4. I know Barrett will talk about this as it relates to Madison. Workload there is 2.2. And that prevents people from being able to negotiate research reassignments that are for things like, curing cancer or, doing research on sustainable energy, things that, the public broadly benefits from. So it was really a misguided deal. And I think the ramifications on our campuses are going to be quite disruptive.
And just for clarity, when you say 2-2 for UW-Madison's campus, it does sound like this deal took into consideration that Madison is a largely research-focused university, so they made requirements less so that professors would be teaching at UW-Madison 2 classes per semester. The 2-2, am I getting that right?
Yeah, you're getting that right. And, the reason for that is that there are classifications for universities, and, both Madison and Milwaukee are what are called Research 1 institutions. So, if their faculty there had to teach 4 workloads, it would deeply, deeply hamstring their ability to do research. But it's important to note that at every other comprehensive university in the system, there are also research expectations.
Can you explain? I understand the 4, so 4 classes, and then the 2-2, just so people are very clear on what you're saying.
Sure. Yeah, 4 classes each semester. 2-2 means 2 classes each semester. So 8 total courses a year at the regional comprehensives, right? Everything outside of Madison.
Got it.
And Milwaukee.
So the 2 semesters. Okay.
2 classes a semester at Madison and Milwaukee.
And I do want to get into the research component and the very fair point you were just making that, hey, there are other universities in addition to those 2 that have that designation that are really dependent on research and how that can be unfair. But I don't want to get too far away from your first point where you started out this conversation about the budget negotiations with the state and how it all happened and the micromanaging. I would like to just kind of step back to that for a moment and just recognize that point and that's been an ongoing creep from the state into higher education. There's been an increase in government trying to dictate how the universities are run. That is just an important point that you made, and I wanted to put a point on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Barrett might have things to say about this as well. But if you think back to late 2023, a lot of your listeners probably remember the so-called DEI deal that was made.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot on the show, for sure.
So this is part of that trajectory. At that time, the legislature had already allocated funding for pay raises for faculty and staff, basically everybody who worked full-time in the UW system. And Robin Vos used the procedural maneuver to hold that up in order to force campuses to cut DEI resources. Jay Rothman, apparently negotiating against himself, basically agreed to cap these DEI resources, things that our students desperately need to be successful as our universities are becoming more diverse, in exchange for funding that we had already received. So this is kind of the next step there. And Vos said that was what he was going to do. He's like, this is the first step. And then, when politicians say this is the first step, at least Republicans, you should probably believe them, because what they did in this budget is try to micromanage things even more, all under the pretense that somehow we're not all working enough, even though everybody I know in the UW system is deeply, deeply overworked and under-resourced.
Yeah, and Barrett, I do want to bring you into the conversation, and just knowing, your role at UW-Madison with the faculty and staff union, what's the reaction to these stipulations? How have they been there?
The devil is in the details, right? It depends on how these workload requirements are implemented. I'm not faculty, I'm academic staff, so I work in a research environment. My full-time job is research. I tangentially teach students how to be safe and design things and work in the lab. It remains to be seen. And again, we're hoping, as both UFAS, other unions on campus, and AFT Wisconsin in general, that will be brought into this conversation, right? We'll be able to have dialogue with the regents and the administrators on our campuses about how to implement this. And it's frustrating to be dealt this hand, right? These procedural moves where you can have money that's already been allocated and passed and signed into law, like the budget back in 2023 and this new budget in 2025, to have that be the law of the land, and then have, again, the Joker committee saying, no, you got to do more. Or
are you referencing the Joint Finance Committee?
Yeah. I would be open to, a more intrusive regulation, not necessarily, but I would be more open to it if the state were actually fully funding the university system, right? This new budget does increase funding to the university system. But prior to this budget, and this doesn't really change the percentage that much, but depending on how you calculate it, the state funds 15 to 17% of UW operations, right? And that austerity has been going on for decades.
Yeah, that's low for this. These are public universities, and you're saying that's 15%. Yeah.
Right. I mean, 15 to 17% is what the state is funding into the UW system. And they want total control, right? And what they've done is they've pushed all of these costs onto students. That's been increased tuition. That's been increased workloads for people like John and myself, and now we're getting this cap on administrative positions is going to just make things harder for everyone trying to do the work of running the university, right? Trying to deliver education, trying to deliver world-class education to all of our students across the state, and to deliver all of this research, right? I think Wisconsin, I don't know where this budget moves us, but Wisconsin prior to this budget was 44th in the nation in terms of public investment in its university system. I mean, we have to do better.
What Barrett's saying here is really, really important. I mean, what the Republicans in the legislature have done, and it is the Republicans who have done this for 15 years now, cutting funding, and then acting like giving a little bit back with a bunch of strings attached is making them the saviors of the UW system. They want to have their cake and eat it too, right? They want to give us a small sliver of funding, but they also want to run everything. And the other thing that's really important about what Barrett just said is, this comes at the expense of profoundly important research. Again, do you want us to be part of curing cancer or, finding sustainable energy or solving supply chain issues, or do you not, right? But it also comes at the expense of our students, because when you say that everybody has to teach more classes without even thinking about the classes that people are teaching or having one conversation with anybody who actually teaches in the UW system, which is how this deal went down, you have no idea what the ramifications are going to be for our students. And the sad thing is that, it's like the frog in the boiling water, right? Our students, because that population changes every year, they don't even notice how deeply degraded the quality of instruction gets when things like this happen. And people like Barrett and me and our colleagues, we work really hard to try and do the best that we can with the resources that we have. But it's just a continual threat to being able to teach well. So how is this going to be, implemented? Are we all going to teach more students? Are we all going to, have to teach classes that people are not qualified to teach? Are we going to have to, again, take away those opportunities to do individual research with students or to offer, academic advising to students? These are the things that are really under threat. And the frustrating thing is we're out there every day. We're on the front lines of working with our students and trying to give them a good experience. And then you have a legislature that's in bad faith trying to really tie our hands. And that's what's going on here. And ultimately, Barrett and I can get other jobs, other places. It's our students who are going to be the ones who suffer. And that's what's sad about it.
Looking for a fun, family-friendly event that truly makes a difference? Join the 18th annual Gilda's Run Walk on Sunday, October 5th at Gilda's Club in Middleton. Whether you choose the self-timed 5K run or the 2-mile walk, there's something for everyone, including when you cross the finish line, a picnic with Ruth's Chris Burgers, chocolate shop ice cream, and activities for all ages. Need a little help getting started? Their free Couch to 5K program offers expert guidance to keep you motivated every step of the way. Register by August 31st for early bird pricing, just $35 for adults and $25 for kids. And get your official event t-shirt. Want to make an even bigger impact? Form a team and fundraise to help keep Gilda's Club program free and accessible for those affected by cancer. Every dollar raised stays right here in Wisconsin, supporting local families. This event is presented by Exact Sciences, Levy Giving Fund, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, and WKOW. Sign up today at gildasrunwalk.com, and together, let's make every step count.
Got any fun trips coming up? One thing you probably haven't put on your packing list is learning the language. But with Babbel, you can start talking in just a few weeks. I'm David Plotz, the CEO of CityCast, and I've been learning Spanish with Babbel. And I also just persuaded my friend who's going to France this fall to learn French with Babbel, but that is another story. Babbel's extremely fun and intuitive. It's like having a private tutor in your pocket. Handcrafted by over 200 language experts, Babbel's lessons are voiced by real native speakers and built with science-backed cognitive tools and interactive features to fit any learning style. I love a lot of the different Babbel features. The Babbel games for sentence building, Babbel speech recognition, which helps me get the pronunciation right. And now I'm really into Babbel's word of the day, which greets me on the homepage of the app. Every day, a new word revealed like a little surprise with a sentence to help contextualize it. It's like a daily treat for me. Studies from Yale, Michigan State, and other leading universities continue to prove that Babbel works. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Look, I want you to learn another language. So I'm teaming up with Babbel to gift you 55% off subscriptions, but only for CityCast listeners at babbel.com/CityCast. Get up to 55% off at babbel.com/CityCast. Spelled BABBEL.com/CityCast. Babbel.com/CityCast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Yeah, I mean, both of you obviously represent these unions. So walking into this conversation, I had a feeling I would know the answer, but it seems clear. And I want to hear from you guys, like in terms of the people that, you know, you're speaking on behalf of as well, in addition to yourselves, like y'all are mad. This is bad. This is bad news, these stipulations around teaching. Is this a big deal?
Again, it depends on how it's implemented, and it depends on the level of input that they take from us. You know, like for at least the last 15 years, like with the Republican control of the legislature here, the UW system has been, you know, systematically underfunded. You know, we've had our knees cut out from under us, and we have succeeded in maintaining world-class education and, you know, leading research in spite of these cuts, right? And it shouldn't be a radical ask. The people that are doing the work, that are educating students, that are doing this research, they should be involved in setting the rules for how this stuff is done, right? Our Board of Regents, our legislatures have very little experience as researchers, as educators. So to have this, you know, have this top-down approach, like it's going to have ramifications that they don't even understand. And again, John's right, like who suffers first? It's going to be the students. You know, they are pushing out good staff and good professors. People are leaving because of the working conditions here. There are some other places in the country that are, you know, still provide better working environments for researchers and academics. But where are the students going to go? I mean, what are we doing here? The university system is a public good that provides education and research. Those are our top things. Like we should be focused on that. And any changes to that should be done with input and direction from not just union leaders, but from everyone that does the actual work.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Barrett. It sounds like it's incredibly frustrating to have people who are not a part of the education and the system telling y'all how to do your job, and also beguiling because of how little money you guys are getting from the state for them to be even having these stipulations. And you've mentioned twice about talking to staff, like it depends how this is carried out, how bad it would be. Like it depends on the conversation and how much of the input from people actually on the ground at the university gets heeded or gets used. Like that will make a difference. Is that in process right now? Like, is there a conversation about how this is going to be playing out?
Bianca, let me say a couple things about this.
Yeah, John, go ahead.
First thing I want to say is, you know, to your question about whether we're mad, we're mad as hell. Actually, is the accurate way to say that. And this is everybody on every campus. I mean, Barrett and I are hearing about this from everybody right now. And, you know, this is problematic, not just because of the immediate impact, but also when the legislature starts dictating the number of courses we have to teach, it's one more step to then dictating what we can teach, the curriculum we can teach, the kinds of courses we can teach, the content we can teach. And they've already tried to do that. You know, a couple of years ago, this was a bill that was vetoed by Evers. the Republicans in the legislature tried to pass a bill mandating that nobody teach DEI on their campuses or offer DEI resources, right? So it's one small step to like that happening. That's number one. And in terms of what we're doing about it, I want to come back to something that I mentioned at the very beginning. Barrett and I, both of our locals, I'm at Green Bay, he's at Madison, the faculty and academic staff chapter. We're part of a bigger group of locals. There's 9 of us at the moment who have all asked our campus administration for union recognition. To this point, every one of them has said no. And so what we're trying to do right now is get the Board of Regents, all of whom are Evers appointees, to issue a regent policy that tells our chancellors that they have to recognize us once we meet a certain threshold. It's something they could totally do. It's very common in other states. And all of this teaching load, and there's some other things we could talk about that we haven't even gotten into, which is that there's another stipulation in this budget that mandates easier course transfer across campuses, which is now leading Jay Rothman to put pressure on campuses to completely revise their general education curriculum to meet this mandate. So people are pissed. They are mad as hell. And there's some shared governance, right? Like faculty senates and the like that are having some of these conversations. The reality is if faculty senates were going to save us, they would have done that already. And what we desperately need is union recognition. And so that is what we're fighting for. We're not just sitting back and hoping things work out okay. When Barrett's talking about how we're going to impact this conversation, that's what we're talking about. Like we're fighting for union recognition. And, we're not going to stop until basically like our campus administrators allow us to have ongoing regular conversations about our working conditions and be a part of negotiating these things moving forward.
To add on to what John said, and the short answer to your question about are these conversations happening? Are the regents who will be drafting this policy in response to the stipulations in the new budget, are the regents coming and talking to faculty and staff at the branch campuses all across the state? The short answer is no. Right? There are some conversations happening in the shared governance bodies, mostly faculty senates. But I would remind people that the shared governance holds on to a name from when there was actually some governing power in those bodies. Ever since Act 10, shared governance has been strictly advisory, right? So you can go to UW-Madison's website, or you can go to the UW system website, and you can see how policies are made and drafted. And at every point they say, we can take input from shared governance, but they don't have to. And oftentimes they don't. And so these conversations are not happening on the broad scale. If, they're happening in some of these faculty senate spaces, but they're not happening at the level that we would like them to happen at. Listeners may be familiar with Act 10 that says public sector bargaining is illegal, right? So that's collective bargaining. So what that means is we can't have a contract, but nothing in that law says they don't have to recognize us. Nothing in that Act 10 says they can't confer with us, so they can't talk to us about issues that are pressing and that impact not just the students, but the working conditions for everyone on these campuses. And it should go without saying, but our working conditions are the learning conditions of all of the students, right? And so that's what we're asking for. We're asking for regular meetings and recognition of our unions because we are small d democratic organizations, right? We have input and we are responsive to our members in a way that UW administrators and the Board of Regents are not.
Well, it's coming across very clear. I mean, y'all are fighting for the autonomy of the universities that you work at and the autonomy to do your jobs and set the curriculum even. Like this could go much farther. And I remember being really shocked. Maybe I shouldn't have been shocked, but, we spoke with the former president of the TAA, the TA's union at UW, when these federal research grants were being cut. We're like, what's going on? And she said, we have not once been able to talk with the chancellor of this university. And we've asked repeatedly for meetings and we have not been able to sit down with them. And that's just really stirring to think that these institutions wouldn't be, really working on more democratic principles. So
that was probably Maddie. She's our BFF.
Yes. I want her to be our BFF, but yeah, she was fantastic on the show. Since we're talking about the TAs. We know that TAs carry a large burden of the workload of teaching, right? Which also allows professors to do other things like research. We did get a quote from a representative from the TA union that represents graduate workers, and that quote said, "We're dismayed by these cruel and misguided requirements, which blatantly misunderstand the role of faculty and a research university. However, it's not yet clear how graduate workers may be affected. We may be called upon to do more work, or TA-ships may be eliminated as faculty do more teaching." That's really frightening. Talk about like if TA's positions were being eliminated, that sounds very disruptive. John, are you concerned about the impact on TAs with these new stipulations?
I'm concerned about this, as I'm sure Barrett agrees with, for every worker in the UW system. And the reason is, again, this deal was made without having a conversation with one effing person who actually works in the UW system, not one person, right? So like there are all kinds of unintended consequences potentially, right? If you're going to say every faculty member has to teach 2 courses at UW, like what does that mean for grad workers? Does that mean they're going to have, as that quote just identified, are they going to have to TA in more of those classes so that those faculty members can be freed up? Are they going to have their TA ships cut? Honestly, Governor Evers has been a good governor in, I think, a lot of ways. Like, I think we were all happy that he beat Walker in 2018. But everybody who I talked to is so frustrated that they agreed to this deal without thinking about any of the potential consequences, because we have no idea how this is going to actually play out. And if they had one conversation with anybody, and to agree to this now at a time when, you talked to Maddie about what was happening at the federal level, my view of this law, and one of the reasons I think Republicans wanted to do this in the legislature is to put research faculty in a vice, right? You think about all the cuts coming from the federal level, from the NIH and all those other kinds of things. And then you think about this squeeze coming at the state level, and it's to put research in a vice. And as I said at the beginning, it's bad faith. You have Republicans who want to score political points because they think all we're doing at our universities is DEI. And the reality is what they're actually hurting are people who are trying to cure cancer. That's the impact of this. So when we're mad about this, this is why we're mad about it. And to have the Evers administration agree to it is just so frustrating because we could have said like, hey, think about the implications of what you're doing here before you agree to something like this, even if it does mean some additional funding for the UW system.
Yeah. And I meant to say this earlier, but this is all in the backdrop of a historic surplus. So
$4 billion.
Yeah.
Again, we don't know how this is going to affect workers and grad students, both TAs and research assistants across the state. But I don't think I'm being, pessimistic when I say that it's not going to be good, right? Again, because there's no input from people that actually do the work, right? And what I would like to see is more funding and more protections for this money that's being lost from the federal government, right? Like UW Medicine alone stands to lose $100 to $200 million of federal money that goes to research. And it's not just curing cancer. I work in a lab where we play a role in developing fusion energy. And there's a massive agricultural research program here that develops, climate resilient crops and all sorts of stuff. And, harping on hypocrisy is kind of weak because it seems like no one really cares anymore. But like, if Republicans were concerned, and if Democrats were concerned, if anyone was concerned about like boosting the economy of Wisconsin, like every dollar that's spent in the university system generates like a tenfold in economic activity, right? The salaries that you pay to workers here are going to stay in that county, in that region, and those are going to get spent there. And the research and the discoveries that are made are going to have this like multiplicative effect on the economy. And so it's good that they're spending some more money in the UW system. But like my argument would be fully fund the UW system, guarantee a free education for any Wisconsin resident that wants to go to the UW system, right? Or the trade schools, whatever, like fully fund this stuff and you will free people from debt and they'll have that money to spend in the state, right? Like there's so many things we could be doing better. And don't give us these stipulations, like ask us, because in spite of your funding cuts, in spite of your austerity, we workers have been making the UW system, this massive draw. People come here to study, and we are producing world-class students and we're producing world-class research.
Absolutely. And world-class results. I went to UW-Madison. I was so excited to go. The Fusion Lab, by the way, was like my favorite thing. The science and research that we have done at UW-Madison, like we have so many landmark things that have changed the history of science, with organ transplants. What the UW system produces is just massive. It's just so massive. And it's frightening to see it being under so much pressure for so long. It feels like this is such a great resource in our state. And it feels like we're really going backwards in time, like especially for UW-Madison's campus. I mean, if you go to the Memorial Union right outside on the side and walk around Alumni Park, it has, sculptures and displays that celebrate and feature all of these notable alumni that have changed the world with the research and endeavors that they did here at UW. It's just, like Gaylord Nelson, founder of Earth Day, and folks who were pioneering stem cell research for drug testing and doing foundational science around organ transplants. And I mean, the legacy is incredible. And, all I ever wanted to be when I was growing up was a professor. And then when I got to college many moons ago at UW-Madison, it was clear that that might not be in the cards if I want sort of the security that folks have experienced in the past. And it feels like over the past decade, higher education jobs have become more and more precarious, and the coveted tenure faculty positions have become increasingly scarce. John, from where you're sitting at AFT Wisconsin, are you hearing about people trying to leave academia? I know Barrett said that is something that he's hearing about.
Bianca, yes. I mean, there's been a number of people in the UW system that I can think of, and certainly on my campus who have left for, private sector jobs. But one of the things I want to make sure that we don't do here is this isn't a funeral march, okay? All the things we're saying about why the UW system is so great in spite of the efforts to kneecap it by Republicans, we have a fight in front of us, and this is what our union is really about. This is why we have a union, right? Barrett and I know the UW system inside and out. Obviously we have more expertise on our own campuses, but, we can sit and talk about all the problems that exist and the challenges. But the reason we do what we do every day is because we believe this is worth fighting for. We believe our students are worth fighting for. We believe this research is worth fighting for. And so do all of our colleagues. AFT Wisconsin just had a Union Leadership Institute in Madison over the weekend. 30 people from across the state were there. I think we had every campus where we have a local representative at that. And, we basically drew up plans for the fight that we're going to have over the next couple of years. And those plans connect to, again, the union recognition campaign. We're going to come out strong in September as far as that goes. And you're going to be seeing some very public stuff there. And then with the state legislative race and the governor's race now wide open, we're only going to be supporting candidates that show up and show that they support the things and are going to fight with us to protect the UW system. And that's what we're going to expect out of anybody who's running. So there are some real opportunities ahead of us right now. Definitely we're worried about these challenges, but the reason that we're here doing this is because we believe this is worth fighting for. And we know this is a fight that we can win. And as workers, when we actually do have a seat at the table, a real seat at the table, that's how we're actually going to save the UW system and actually make it into, I can't agree with Barrett more that we need to have a tuition-free future for the UW system and all other higher ed. That includes tech colleges in the state. And the way we're going to get there is by fighting for it. But we can build that world, and we will.
All right. John, thank you so much for coming on the program. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime.
And you as well, Barrett. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
That's John Shelton, UW Green Bay professor and president of higher education for the American Federation of Teachers, or AFT Wisconsin. Also, Barrett Elward, instrumentation engineer and president of United Faculty and Academic Staff, or UFAS at UW-Madison. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. Before we go, we have to give a big shout out to our two newest CityCast Madison neighbors. Welcome Sherry K and Daniel V. We're so happy to have you on the squad. Thanks for joining. Don't forget, y'all, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Madison neighbor. Just head to membership.citycast.fm. And hey, if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this episode with someone who works in the public sector? Alrighty, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care.